A crisp autumn wind whipped fallen leaves around Samantha's ankles as she navigated the bustling chaos of Ashen Falls Flea Market. The air crackled with the cacophony of haggling vendors and excited shoppers, a symphony of commerce she found strangely comforting. As an antique enthusiast, Samantha thrived on the thrill of the hunt, the possibility of unearthing a forgotten treasure tucked away amongst the bric-a-brac. Dylan, her ever-patient boyfriend, trailed a few steps behind, his face a mask of tolerant amusement. "Dolls again?" he teased, eyeing the mountains of stuffed animals and porcelain tea sets. Samantha winked, a playful glint in her hazel eyes. "Never underestimate the power of a good doll, Dylan. You never know what secrets they hold." Then, tucked away in a far corner, shrouded in an air of unsettling mystery, Samantha saw it. A stall draped in thick black velvet, devoid of the usual gaudy displays. Behind it sat a tall, gaunt figure with eyes that flickered like dying embers. A shiver danced down Samantha's spine, a premonition of something more than just an antique seller. "Mr. Pupa," the man rasped, his voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "Welcome to my humble collection." He gestured towards a display of porcelain dolls, each one exquisitely crafted. Their faces were painted with an unsettling realism, their expressions ranging from melancholic gazes to unsettling, wide-eyed stares. One doll in particular caught Samantha's eye. It was a young girl, her porcelain skin flawless, with a teardrop painted very realistically on one cheek, along with a slightly runny nose. Emerald eyes, polished to an unnatural shine, seemed to bore into Samantha's soul. An inexplicable pull drew her towards it. Despite Dylan's murmured warnings about the unsettling atmosphere, Samantha found herself reaching for the doll. "A curious choice," Mr. Pupa rasped, his lips barely moving. "But perhaps the perfect one." A sly smile, devoid of warmth, played on his gaunt features. "Just remember, miss," he continued, his voice dropping to a low whisper, "dolls have a way of keeping secrets. And sometimes those secrets whisper back." Samantha ignored the creeping unease in her gut, the weight of Mr. Pupa's words settling on her like a shroud, because this doll would be perfect for her collection. The doll, clutched tightly in her hand, felt strangely warm, almost feverish. Back at their cozy apartment, the initial charm of the porcelain girl began to curdle. In the dead of night, Samantha would swear she saw the doll's head twitch ever so slightly, the single black tear seemingly glistening under the moonlight. Faint whispers, like the rustle of dead leaves, would dance on the edge of her hearing, only to vanish when she strained to listen. After a while, it seemed as if all her dolls were whispering ominous things in her head. One morning, Dylan found it chilling seeing Samantha, pale and glassy-eyed, sat at the table, the doll in front of her. A trail of objects, a pen, a book, a hairbrush, stretched from the doll's outstretched hand to the edge of the table. The whispers were no longer faint, they formed a chilling chorus that only Samantha seemed to hear. Driven by a growing sense of terror, Samantha knew she had to return to Ashen Falls. Mr. Pupa's stall remained, shrouded in its ominous black velvet. When she confronted him, his eyes flickered with a cold amusement. "The whispers have begun," he rasped, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "Those dolls hold restless souls, Mississippi. The girl you chose, she was a lonely child, forever seeking attention. She must have found it with your other dolls." Samantha's stomach lurched. "What do I do?" she pleaded. "How can I make it stop?" Mr. Pupa's smile widened, revealing a chilling glint of gold teeth. "Each doll has a past, Mississippi. A place they long to return to. Find their final resting spots, appease the restless souls, and the whispers may cease." He scribbled cryptic clues on a scrap of parchment, his hand moving with inhuman speed. "But beware, miss," he warned, his voice a low growl. "The longer you wait, the stronger they become." As Samantha clutched the parchment, fear choked her. The thrill of the hunt had morphed into a desperate quest for survival. The seemingly innocent faces of the dolls stared back at her from memory, each one a gateway to a terrifying past. The whispers grew louder, urging her onwards, towards the desolate moors where the restless souls yearned for solace, and Samantha, armed with Mr. Pupa's cryptic clues, knew this was just the beginning of a chilling journey. The moors stretched before them, a barren wasteland of tall grass and ancient stones, whispering secrets in a language only the wind understood. Rain had begun to fall, casting a gloomy shroud over the land. Dylan drove their car, his knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel too tightly. Samantha navigated, the whispers from the dolls in the back seat growing more insistent with every mile. The first burial site was a small, forgotten cemetery, the headstones lurching like rotten teeth from the earth. Rain pattered against the doll's box, and Samantha could have sworn she heard a muffled sigh of relief as she opened it. The doll with the perpetually sad eyes stared up at her, and she felt a pang of pity before remembering the chaos it had brought into her life. Carefully, she placed the doll beside a crumbling headstone, the name barely legible through the moss. The whispers grew softer, the doll's eyes dimming to a dull glow. The second doll's resting place was a desolate shack, long abandoned to the ravages of time. Wind howled through the broken windows, carrying the scent of decay. Samantha's heart raced as she stepped inside, the whispers swirling around her like a malevolent fog. The doll with the runny nose watched her, emerald eyes gleaming in the darkness. As she set it down on the dusty floorboards, the whispers grew louder, a cacophony of anguished cries that seemed to shake the very foundation of the building. The shack rumbled, the doll's head twitching in a macabre nod of approval before the whispers faded away. Each doll brought them closer to understanding the depth of Mr. Pupa's warning. The malice emanating from them grew palpable, the whispers evolving into an angry cacophony that seemed to taunt Samantha with every step. The final doll remained, its eyes a piercing, haunting black that seemed to follow her everywhere she went. The thought of its resting place filled her with dread, but she knew the only way to silence the whispers for good was to complete the grim task. The next clue led them to a hilltop, the land saturated with a malevolent energy that seemed to seep into their very bones. A solitary tree, its branches twisted like the limbs of a tortured soul, stood sentinel over the grave of the doll's soul. Samantha approached, her hand trembling as she held the doll out. The whispers grew to a fever pitch, a chorus of rage and despair that seemed to resonate through the very air around them. The moment the doll's porcelain hand touched the cold earth, the whispers stopped. The doll's head lolled back, its eyes glazed over. The malicious aura dissipated, leaving only a profound silence in its wake. Samantha felt a sudden lightness, as if a weight had been lifted from her soul. But as she turned to leave, the whispers began anew, faint but unmistakable. The tree's branches shifted, and the doll's eyes gleamed in the moonlight. Mr. Pupa's warning echoed in her mind. The stronger they become. The battle was far from over. Dylan, his skepticism forgotten, gripped Samantha's hand tightly as they raced back to the car, the whispers now a deafening roar in their ears. They could feel the malevolent presence of the dolls coalescing into something far greater than they had anticipated. As they sped away from the hilltop, the sky grew darker, the clouds swirling into an angry maelstrom above them. The whispers grew more insistent, turning into a cacophony of screams that seemed to echo through the very fabric of the night. Samantha's heart hammered in her chest, the fear palpable in every beat. The final resting place lay before them, a cobblestone path leading to a long-abandoned mansion. The doll's whispers grew frenzied, urging Samantha to hurry, their desperation palpable. She clutched the last doll, its lifeless body feeling heavier with each step she took towards the mansion's looming silhouette. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of decay and a sense of dread that seemed to suffocate them. The doll's whispers grew louder, guiding Samantha through the cobweb-covered halls. Dylan held a flashlight, casting eerie shadows that danced on the peeling wallpaper. In the heart of the mansion, they found a hidden chamber, the walls adorned with ancient symbols that seemed to pulse with dark energy. At the center stood a small, ornate chair, its cushion stained with a crimson hue. The whispers grew to a crescendo, and Samantha knew this was where she had to leave the doll. With trembling hands, she placed the doll on the chair. The whispers grew silent. The air in the room grew colder, and a sudden pressure built around them. The doll's eyes snapped open, and a malevolent force surged from its porcelain body, coalescing into a creature of pure horror. The room shook as the spirit manifested, its form a twisted amalgamation of the doll's features. The creature's eyes, black as the abyss, fixed on Samantha with a rage that seemed to burn through the very essence of her being. "You dare disturb our slumber!" it hissed, its voice a chorus of the doll's whispers. "You shall pay for your audacity!" Samantha's mind raced, searching for any shred of knowledge that could help her banish this monstrosity. She recalled tales of local folklore, of ancient rites used to lay restless spirits to rest. Summoning her courage, she began to chant the incantation she had read, her voice trembling but growing stronger with each word. The creature recoiled, the whispers of the dolls swirling around her, lending her their power. Dylan watched in awe and terror as the room grew brighter, the symbols on the walls pulsing in time with Samantha's words. The spirit writhed in agony, trying to escape the binding force of the incantation. With a final, desperate cry, the spirit was torn from the doll, a scream that seemed to rip through the very fabric of reality. The doll's eyes faded, the whispers silenced forever. The room plunged into darkness, the air thick with the stench of brimstone. When the light returned, the doll lay lifeless, the eerie glow gone. Samantha collapsed to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. The mansion stood still, the malevolent aura lifted. They had survived Mr. Pupa's curse, but the experience had left an indelible mark on their souls. The journey home was a blur of quiet contemplation, the weight of their ordeal settling heavily upon them. They knew that the whispers may never truly leave them, a constant reminder of the bargain they had struck with the dolls of Ashen Falls. The next morning, the sun rose over the town, casting a warm glow on the cobblestone streets. The market stalls were already bustling with life, the air filled with the sweet aroma of freshly baked bread and the chatter of early risers. Yet the memory of the whispers lingered in Samantha's mind like a hangover from a nightmare that refused to fade. She and Dylan returned to the flea market, seeking answers, or perhaps closure. Mr. Pupa's stall was open, the black velvet curtains fluttering in the morning breeze. The dolls were nowhere to be seen, replaced by an assortment of tarnished silverware and dusty books. The old man himself was nowhere in sight. A young couple was haggling over an antique clock, blissfully unaware of the horrors that had unfolded in the very spot where they stood. "Mr. Pupa?" Samantha called out, her voice barely above a whisper. The clock chimed, and from the shadows emerged the skeletal figure, his eyes flickering with a knowing gaze. "Ah, miss," he croaked. "You've returned. I trust your companions are at peace?" "Where are they?" she demanded, the anger in her voice surprising even herself. He leaned in, his breath a whiff of decay. "Where they belong, I assure you. But remember, the past is not easily buried. Sometimes it claws its way back to the surface." With a final, unsettling smile, Mr. Pupa disappeared into the shadows, leaving Samantha with a sense of foreboding. Days turned into weeks, and the whispers grew faint, almost imperceptible. Life returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the haunting experience remained a constant topic of conversation between Samantha and Dylan. They pored over books of local folklore, piecing together the grim history of the dolls and the artists who had crafted them. One evening, as they sat in their apartment, surrounded by the trappings of their quiet life, the whispers grew louder. The air grew cold, and the room was filled with an eerie silence that seemed to pulse with malicious intent. "We can't ignore this," Dylan said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "We have to face it together." They set out into the night, the whispers guiding them back to the moors. The journey was fraught with tension, each step bringing them closer to a truth they weren't prepared to face. Upon reaching the mansion, the whispers grew to a crescendo. The doors to the hidden chamber swung open, revealing a scene that sent a shiver down Samantha's spine. The dolls were all there, their eyes gleaming in the flickering candlelight. The creature of darkness had returned, stronger and more twisted than before. The storm raged outside, mirroring the tempest within the chamber. The creature, a grotesque amalgamation of porcelain and malice, lunged, its twisted limbs a blur. Samantha stumbled back, the smell of burning flesh stinging her nostrils. Dylan, his face etched with a desperate bravery, shoved a burning table leg at the entity, momentarily stalling its advance. "Remember the stories, Samantha!" he shouted above the din. "Their past, their weaknesses." Samantha's mind raced. The girl with the runny nose water. The boy with the missing eye distraction. Drawing on every shred of knowledge gleaned from the dolls and forgotten lore, she sprang into action. She grabbed a dusty urn from a nearby shelf and hurled it at the creature. A plume of ashes erupted, momentarily blinding it. In that split second, Dylan lunged forward, thrusting the flaming table leg towards its porcelain eye. A shriek of unimaginable agony tore through the chamber. The creature writhed, its form flickering and distorting. With a final, ear-splitting roar, it dissolved into a swirling vortex of dark energy that was sucked into a crack that suddenly appeared in the wall. The crack slammed shut with a deafening boom, the silence that followed thick and suffocating. Samantha and Dylan collapsed onto the cold floor, their bodies racked with exhaustion. They had done it. They had banished the entity, or so they hoped. A shaky cough escaped Dylan's lips. "Is it over?" Samantha didn't answer. She stared at the spot where the creature had vanished, a cold dread creeping into her heart. Despite the oppressive silence, a sense of unease lingered in the air. As they stumbled out of the mansion, the first rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of pink and orange. The storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie stillness. They reached their car, the worn leather a welcome haven. Samantha turned the key, the engine sputtering before roaring to life. They tore away from the looming mansion, not daring to glance back. Days turned into weeks, then months. The whispers seemed to have truly faded, replaced by the comforting normalcy of their daily lives. Yet a shadow clung to them, a constant reminder of their ordeal. One crisp autumn evening, much like the one that had led them to Mr. Pupa's stall, Samantha was browsing a local antique store. Her eyes drifted towards a dusty display case, and her breath caught in her throat. There, nestled among chipped teacups and tarnished silver, sat a porcelain doll. It was a little girl, her face painted with a melancholic expression. But it wasn't just any doll. A single, black tear trickled down its cheek, glistening ominously under the dim light. A cold sweat prickled Samantha's skin. It couldn't be, could it? As she reached out, a skeletal hand clamped down on her wrist. Mr. Pupa stood behind her, his eyes flickering like dying embers. "Ah, miss," he rasped, a sly smile playing on his lips. "Looking for a new companion?" Samantha ripped her hand free, a primal scream rising in her throat. But it was too late. The familiar whispers filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Mr. Pupa chuckled, a sound like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "The whispers never truly leave, do they, miss?" he said, his voice dripping with amusement. "Sometimes, they just wait for the right moment to return." The world blurred around Samantha as the whispers drowned out all other sound. Her scream died in her throat, replaced by a chilling realization. The battle for their sanity, it seemed, had only just begun. The world dissolved into a swirling vortex of black and white, the whispers morphing into a cacophony of tormented voices. Samantha felt a hand grip her shoulder, its touch like ice against her skin. It was Dylan, his eyes wide with terror, mirroring her own. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound emerged, swallowed whole by the relentless din. Suddenly, Mr. Pupa was gone. The antique store, with its dusty displays and stale air, vanished. In its place, a desolate moor stretched before them, the wind whipping at their clothes, carrying the scent of damp earth and decay. In the distance, the skeletal frame of the abandoned mansion loomed, a jagged silhouette against the blood-red sky. The whispers, now discernible words laced with a chilling hatred, coalesced into a single, monstrous entity. It stood before them, a grotesque amalgamation of all the dolls, their porcelain faces contorted into masks of rage. Black tears streamed down its cheeks, etching trails of darkness across its body. Its eyes, a kaleidoscope of shattered emerald and obsidian, locked onto Samantha. "You dared disturb our slumber," it boomed, its voice a chorus of tormented screams. "You will pay for your arrogance." Panic clawed at Samantha's throat. She remembered the forgotten lore, the weakness the dolls shared, a connection to their earthly remains. But how could they exploit that here, in this desolate wasteland where their final resting places were unknown? Desperation fueled her next move. She lunged for the monstrous doll, grabbing it tightly. An agonizing jolt shot through her arm as shards of porcelain dug into her flesh. The whispers intensified, a chilling symphony of pain and fury. Yet Samantha held on, her eyes locked on Dylan. "Run!" she screamed, the word ripping through the cacophony. "Find Mr. Pupa, his weakness, anything!" Dylan, his face etched with terror and determination, nodded. He turned and sprinted towards the mansion, the whispers clawing at his heels. The entity writhed in Samantha's grasp, its porcelain form scraping against her skin. "You cannot escape us," it hissed. "This torment is your eternity." Just then, a flicker of movement caught her eye. A lone raven circled above the mansion, its obsidian silhouette stark against the crimson sky. A forgotten memory surfaced. Mr. Pupa's collection wasn't limited to dolls. It held a raven taxidermy too. Was that his connection to the entity? With renewed hope, Samantha ripped a shard of porcelain from the doll and flung it towards the raven. It caught in surprise before plummeting towards the ground, landing lifeless near the mansion's entrance. A deafening silence descended. The entity, its form flickering and wavering, stared at the fallen raven, a flicker of fear replacing its rage. Then, with a final, ear-splitting shriek, it dissolved into a swirling vortex of black energy that was sucked back into the mansion through a gaping crack in the wall. The crack slammed shut with a deafening boom, leaving behind an unsettling stillness. Samantha slumped to the ground, her body drained but alive. She waited, her heart hammering in her chest, for any sign of Dylan. The silence stretched on, broken only by the mournful wail of the wind. Finally, a figure emerged from the shadows of the mansion, Dylan, his face pale but resolute. He didn't need to say anything. They both knew this wasn't over. They had merely bought themselves some time, a fragile reprieve in a game far from one. As they walked away from the mansion, the setting sun cast long, grotesque shadows across the desolate landscape. Samantha glanced back one last time, a shiver running down her spine. The mansion stood silent, a malevolent presence against the dying light. In the distance, a single raven circled, its obsidian eyes glinting with a chilling intelligence. They had escaped for now. But the whispers, faint echoes carried by the wind, lingered in their minds. "This is not over. We will return." The battle for their sanity had just begun, and the desolate moors, once a chilling battleground, now held the chilling promise of their inevitable return. Weeks bled into months. The whispers, once a constant barrage, became a faint echo, a disquieting reminder lurking in the back of their minds. One seemingly ordinary Tuesday, Samantha was enjoying a cup of coffee on their balcony when a glint of obsidian caught her eye. A raven, perched on the railing, stared at her with an unsettling intensity. Its gaze held a chilling familiarity, a spark of recognition that sent a jolt of terror through her. The raven cawed, a harsh sound that scraped against Samantha's nerves. It hopped closer, its black eyes seeming to bore into her soul. As it opened its beak, a whisper, faint but unmistakable, tickled Samantha's ear. "You thought you were rid of us?" Panic surged through her. She slammed the balcony door shut, the clatter echoing in the otherwise quiet apartment. Dylan, alerted by the noise, rushed in, his face etched with concern. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice laced with worry. Samantha pointed at the balcony door, her voice trembling. "The raven, it spoke. It said—" The raven's cawing resonated from outside, a relentless assault on their fragile peace. Dylan, seeing the terror in her eyes, knew the whispers were back. That night, the whispers intensified, a cacophony of tormented voices that filled their apartment. Sleep was impossible. They tossed and turned, the whispers gnawing at their sanity. The next morning, driven by desperation, they returned to Ashen Falls. The flea market was bustling as usual, a stark contrast to the chilling memories it evoked. But Mr. Pupa's stall was nowhere to be seen. Days turned into a frantic search, leading them down a rabbit hole of dead ends and cryptic rumors. Finally, an old woman who frequented the market, known for her knowledge of local lore, offered a glimmer of hope. "Mr. Pupa," she rasped, her voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind, "never truly leaves. He's part of the town, woven into its very fabric." Her words sparked a realization in Samantha's mind. Mr. Pupa wasn't just a man, he was a conduit, a vessel for the restless spirits of the dolls. Destroying the dolls had severed their connection to the earthly realm, but Mr. Pupa, the source of their torment, remained. Following the old woman's cryptic clues, they found themselves at the town cemetery, the headstones like silent sentinels under the pale moonlight. There, nestled amidst the overgrown foliage, stood a weathered mausoleum. A chill ran down Samantha's spine. This was it. They had found Mr. Pupa's final resting place. The heavy iron gate creaked open with a rusty groan. Inside, an unsettling stillness hung heavy in the air. A single sarcophagus lay in the center, adorned with an inscription that had weathered with time. With trembling hands, Samantha brushed away the dirt, revealing the name etched onto the stone, not Mr. Pupa, but a name from the forgotten past, a name mentioned in the whispers, the name of the artist who had crafted the tormented dolls. Understanding dawned on Samantha. Mr. Pupa was a fabrication, a mask worn by the tormented spirit of the artist, forever bound to the dolls he had created. They needed to sever that connection, to free the artist's soul and finally put the whispers to rest. But how? As Samantha pondered this, a faint shimmer emanated from the sarcophagus. With a heart-stopping thud, the lid creaked open, revealing a skeletal hand adorned with a single, tarnished silver ring. The whispers intensified, swirling around the hand like a malevolent vortex. Suddenly, Dylan pointed to the mausoleum's wall. An inscription, previously hidden by a creeping vine, revealed a ritual, an offering needed to appease the tormented spirit and break its hold on the dolls. Hope surged through Samantha. They had what they needed. She dug into her backpack, pulling out a small, porcelain doll, a memento from their harrowing experience. It wasn't one of the originals, but perhaps it would suffice. Following the inscription's instructions, they placed the doll on a pedestal beside the sarcophagus. The whispers grew deafening, a storm of rage and despair. Then, with a blinding flash of light, the doll disintegrated into dust. Silence descended, thick and heavy. The air grew strangely cold. A single raven cawed from the mausoleum's entrance, the sound echoing through the stillness. Then, a faint sigh, a wisp of spectral energy dissipating into the night. The whispers were gone. Exhausted but relieved, Samantha and Dylan stumbled out of the mausoleum. As they walked away, bathed in the pale moonlight, a cold wind whipped through the cemetery, carrying the scent of damp earth and a faint, unsettling sweetness. "Do you think it's really over?" Dylan asked, his voice barely a whisper. Samantha squeezed his hand, a flicker of doubt lingering in her eyes. "We did everything right, according to the inscription." But the raven's caw echoed in her mind, a haunting melody tinged with something else. As they reached the cemetery gate, a figure emerged from the shadows. Tall and gaunt, with eyes that flickered like dying embers, it was a man they hadn't seen before, but somehow recognized. "Lost, are we?" he rasped, his voice a dry rustle of leaves. A faint scent of lilies, the same sweetness from the wind, clung to him. "Who are you?" Dylan demanded, stepping protectively in front of Samantha. The man chuckled, a sound devoid of warmth. "A friend, perhaps," he said, his gaze locking onto Samantha. "Someone who understands the burden of the past." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box. As he flipped it open, a faint, sickly sweet aroma filled the air. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a single object, a porcelain doll. It was unlike any they had seen before, crafted with an unsettling realism, a single black tear tracing a path down its cheek. "A gift," the man continued, his voice a low murmur. "A reminder that some stories never truly end." Before either of them could react, the figure vanished into the night, leaving behind only the lingering scent of lilies and the chilling presence of the doll. Samantha stared at it, a cold dread creeping into her heart. This doll, unlike the others, wasn't broken or lifeless. Its eyes, pools of inky blackness, seemed to follow her every move. The whispers, faint at first, began to rise once more, a chilling melody carried on the wind. This time, however, they weren't a cacophony of tormented voices. This time, They were a single, chilling whisper, laced with a sickening sweetness. Welcome back. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider subscribing to stay updated with our latest stories, give us a like if you want to see more, and drop a comment below to let us know your thoughts.